Hey, everybody, welcome to the Story Studio podcast. I think Sean's going to kind of MC this one because this is going to be a very different version of the podcast and actually steps into it's the Story Studio podcast. Well, what the hell does that mean? Because it still looks like the self-publishing podcast. Well, you'll find out in this episode because we have, 16 total people on?
That's going to be a lot of something cools.
It's going to be a lot. Yeah, maybe we just don't do something cool this week.
Our something cool this week will be our introductions. How's that?
There you go.
Okay, yeah, so...
we're talking about Watchmen, right?
Yeah,
to mention the topic.
Yeah, let's get right to this because...
Sorry, big spoilers. Let's just be clear on that. If you haven't seen all of Watchmen and want to see it, do not listen to this episode.
This will be chock full of spoilers because actually that's the reason that, or one of the big reasons that I wanted not just to watch it, but for all of us to watch it. Because I think that we're going to be stealing from the show for a long time, with just certain vocabulary, certain ways of approaching story. There's just a lot to glean. And it's the first time ever where there was we don't have mandatory things here, really. But this was the closest thing to a mandatory, okay, everybody watch this, take the time to watch this so we can have a conversation, because I think that we meet twice a week for story meetings, and in those story meetings, we use a lot of common vocabulary, and it makes the story meetings go faster because we can speak in shorthand to each other. We all know what we're thinking with, certain phrases. And so there's certain phrases I know that we're going to take away from the Watchmen that we'll be using. And we haven't talked about this yet. That's kind of the beauty of this. We're having this conversation for the first time in front of you guys. Which is exciting. We wanted to enjoy it individually as a studio and then talk about it collectively to see how it will make us better collaborators in the future. So I think even if you write alone, whether you write with a partner or a group or whatever, if you're a storyteller, I think this is going to be an exciting couple of episodes. We're going to try to keep it super on point. I know we're usually off topic. I know we overlap. I know all of that stuff. But today we're going to keep it on. Bonnie is such a mastermind, you guys. We're just so lucky to have her constantly. She watched Watchmen a couple times through, which I did too. But I didn't make 20 pages of notes like Bonnie did and then convert those into discussion questions for today. So we're going to go through those questions. I'm going to call on the various storytellers in the room. And then other of us will contribute to the conversation, and we'll see how this goes. But I'm excited for this. So let's start with intros. Bonnie, we all know you, but Bonnie.
Hi, I'm Bonnie, and I'm part of the Sterling and Stone editorial team.
90.
While 90 is muted, I would just say that Bonnie is really underselling as part of the editorial team.
Yes, I would agree with that. 90.
I'm 90, and I'm the old person here, and I write suspense, every flavor except pistachio.
You're the person with the most experience here.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I'd say the veteran. Oh, I would also add the person with more reviews than the rest of the company put together, maybe. So there's that. That's what you should walk away with. All right, Dan.
Hey, I'm Dan. Do primarily book covers for the studio, and also working on trying to find my niche, possibly audio dramas. We'll see how it goes this year.
Ben.
Hey, I'm Ben. I write a lot of sci-fi and fantasy, mostly with a streak of humor.
Joel.
Howdy, I'm Joel, and I write stuff, largely whatever they tell me to write.
That's a true story. Virid.
Hi, I'm Veidt. I'm from Kenya, and I write mainly cozy mysteries, and I like to write stories that are uplifting, fun, and funny. Cheers.
Virid's also just a hell of a good time. If you can get her to eat, have dinner with her, because you'll laugh a lot and you'll see her.
Have dinner with her and 90.
Yeah, that's a good time.
And Eileen. That trio is, oh my God.
Okay, well then I guess we got to kick it to Eileen.
Eileen, I guess I'm part of the trio. I'm just trying to write creepy things. I just like to creep everyone out. So
which she does.
Yeah, I won't read Eileen's stories or Dave's.
There's a few of us in here now. And Marie.
Hi, I'm Marie. I write pretty much whatever, but I like fantasy the most. So looking forward to the day I get to do that.
All right, and then we have a mystery storyteller that you guys don't get to know about. She's our new Dave, actually, and I'm not even kidding. Like, Dave is totally her spirit animal, and she's like, I'm gonna be Dave, okay? I'm like, okay. So let's talk first about why.
Wait a minute. What is that incognito? Is there somebody you're not going to mention, but we all we hear is that she's the new Dave?
Yeah, yes.
I don't know why there's. I'm going to say who it is.
Look at the Brady Bunch. You can do the math here.
No, I can do the math. I'm just wondering why there's one person you're not specifically mentioning by name.
Because I was asked not to.
Oh, okay. I missed that piece. All right.
Yeah,
just trying to stir the pot.
All right. Yeah, and that's not me doing mystery box stuff. I've been chastised this week about how much teasing I do about big shit. I mean, if you listen to this show, you already are aware of this part of my personality, but I do it within the company too. So
it's such a tease.
I've heard. Okay, so I'm going to direct this question to Dave, actually, because
shit.
Yeah, well, we all love you, we all know you, but also with this question, I mean, really, Watchmen started with you because
yes, I made it back in the 80s.
Well, you were just adamant about, oh my God, this show is so good.
I saw it so long ago, I don't even remember it.
Yeah, but he also said that about Angry Birds.
Well, no, that's the thing.
Only
He
the
said it
piss,
about
yeah.
a lot of things, but it was specifically what he was saying about this show that really did light me up. And that wouldn't have made it enough to get on the top of my queue. But it was like back to back with Bonnie. And so these are powerful recommendations because Dave, we tend to enjoy things on just like very similar. I'd say we have 80% overlap on, actually, I would say we have really, really close overlap on the stuff he likes, but there's a lot of stuff I like that he doesn't. That I would add is because he doesn't give a chance. But with Bonnie, she takes such a scientific approach to storytelling. So I knew that on one hand, this was going to hit me on just a pop culture gut punch level. And then on the other hand, it was just going to be incredible story. And the weight of both Dave and Bonnie, like how much they were recommending this, I'm like, okay, I gotta see it. And then we watched the first episode, me and Cindy, and I could just tell she wasn't vibing it. So the next day I was like, all right, I'm gonna continue to watch this on my own. And I did, and every single new episode I was just like, oh my God, like this is exposition at its best. Like there's so much that's great about this. And then when I was finished, I'm like, yeah, we've all got to watch this. So it really did start with Dave and his just unbridled enthusiasm for the material. So the question is, what did you love about the series' take on Watchmen World? And what do you think it brings to the original, both as a continuation of the original and as something that stands on its own?
Well, I think that the original Watchmen comic was, considered such an untouchable thing, and the movie attempted it. Some people liked it, some people didn't.
Did you?
What I remember of it was okay, but I hadn't really read the comic back then. I'd read it since. So I would say, as far as, the comic is concerned, like a lot of people are like, why would you even bother? Why would you even do this? I mean, it's insane. It's so beloved. Why would you screw it up? And I like that they made bold choices. They didn't make it a reboot. They made it a sequel of sorts, a continuation, and brought their own things into it in a way that like the creator of Watchmen wouldn't have been happy with whatever they did. But I think this is so much in the spirit of, what I think he would have done that I don't know. I felt it was worthy of the title. It earned it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I felt like it went sideways instead of, like, I didn't feel like it was a sequel. I felt like it was, this really amazing world was created. you know, I'm going to tell my own story in it. And I think that especially resonated with me because it's the way we've been telling stories for the last year and a half, 2 years, right? Where we're saying, okay, we're going to create this collective, you know, universe together. And then we're going to stake out our own place in there and use our own storytelling voices, unique, you know, individually, to create our own pockets of these worlds. And that's what Damon Lindelof did. He's like, okay, you know, clearly he loved The Watchmen. Like, there's so much love for the source material that it's really inspiring as a creator to see how somebody else so lovingly handled someone else's art. And he did. Like, it's so finely crafted. But it didn't feel like a sequel. It wasn't like, okay, I have to, because in a sequel, you think of all the questions that have been left open that you're now answering. And this wasn't that. It was like a whole new exploration of some new things. And, you know, I'll wait to get into some of the specifics because I'm sure they'll arise. But yeah.
And they made you wait to see what you were wondering, what are they going to bring from the original into this? And it was almost like there were a lot of Easter eggs, some of it a bit heavy handed with the naming and stuff, but I'll forgive it. But how they brought in Ozymandias was absolutely like the best.
Was that your favorite sequence of each episode? Like, what's up with Adrian Veidt this episode? Because there's always like zany.
Yeah. Why don't you guys do a rundown of what was in the comics and the movie? Because the Watchmen TV show is literally my only exposure to it. So like I spent most of the time like just trying to figure it out because I didn't know all the background. And so I figured Jeremy Irons' character I figured he was Dr. Manhattan, and that's what we were going to learn. But so, because I didn't have any of the background. So can you guys share like what the sorts of things that you knew and what was there?
Yeah, I'll let Dave speak to that because he did a really great rundown in Slack.
Yeah, and I tried to find that rundown, but by the time I watched it, it was, you know, so far back.
Yeah.
Basically, a bunch of vigilante heroes without powers, with the exception of Dr. Manhattan and Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, thought that the world was on the brink of nuclear destruction. He needed to find a way to bring people together, so he created this elaborate hoax of a giant squid in New York City, dropping down an alien squid and killing a whole bunch of people.
3 million people.
What's that?
3 million people. That's significant.
Yeah, a few. And and it brought the world together. It averted nuclear war, and we, you know, stopped hating each other, and then, you know, we got together after that. So
yeah. And
do you think he would have been upset to know that nuclear war didn't actually happen and that squid was for naught?
Well, okay, so
way to kill 3 million people, fucker.
Bonnie raised her hand.
Bonnie.
I think that the two big things that struck me as being a continuation of the original were Dr. Manhattan's and Adrian Veidt's character arcs. Because in the first one, we see Dr. Manhattan basically losing his humanity. And in this one, we see him regaining his humanity through love. And then Adrian Veidt, we saw him aspiring to basically become humanity's God in the original. And his arc in this TV series is he's actually becoming disillusioned with godhood, and he comes to the realization at the end that anybody who aspires to attain godhood should be prevented from having it.
Okay, Bonnie, you're so awesome, because I wasn't even considering their previous arcs as part of this larger arc, and that makes it so much more beautiful. And it kind of contradicts something I was just about to say, but I want to say it anyway because I think there's still value to this thought, which I didn't think that. I mean, yes, what you're saying absolutely adds to the experience of watching The Watchmen, but I think that even if you don't have that experience and you don't know the original story, this so holds on its own. And that's what I was worried about, why I was so willing to bail with Cindy right away, because I didn't want to subject her to this, like, you know, okay, this is going to be real tedious, and you have to know about the giant squid and, you know, and the comedian and all this crazy stuff, right? Like, I didn't want her to have to know that. But after I watched, I I've watched it for the second time, except for the finale, which I'll watch tonight. And I've been watching it the second time with Cindy and Haley, and they're both really enjoying it. And it's just, you have to, like, I should have had more faith in the storytelling, but after episode 1, like, I knew I would enjoy it, but I didn't know that it would do such an amazing job of rewarding patience and answering every question. Yeah, Marie.
I just wanted to put in that I had the exact same experience with it. It actually took me about 3 or 4 episodes to get into, and I probably wouldn't have stuck with it if it weren't like, if this conversation wasn't going to happen and I didn't want to participate, I'd be like, it's not worth it. But I am glad that I stuck with it because it did end up rewarding. And but yeah, I had the same experience. I know nothing except sort of the vague cultural osmosis like version of Watchmen, which is like there's these superheroes that are so disconnected from humanity that they're gods, and it's basically like a deconstruction of the superhero genre from what I know, and that's everything I know.
did you feel that by the end your patience was rewarded?
Yes.
Or was there anything that you felt like, well, that didn't really get answered for me, or that was too confusing? Or by the end, was it like, okay, I get what happened?
I did end up fully understanding, and it was definitely a satisfying whole experience. Yeah. I don't recall any particular questions not getting answered. I do recall being frustrated because I didn't know who that boy was at the very start. They spent so much time on him on the first episode, and then you don't find out until like episode 6 or something, when it's like, oh. So, yeah. But there was a lot of those moments, a lot of like, oh, I understand why they did that.
Yeah,
which was pretty cool.
Yeah, my experience was, let me see if I can successfully describe this. So there was, I didn't have a problem with stuff like that because I just figured the story would tell me, and that's a natural, like Sydney, my daughter, is at this stage now where she'll be like, she'll watch that. What happened? I don't understand. I'm like, you're not supposed to know yet. You have to wait. Like, that's a box that's going to be, and she doesn't have that muscle yet.
Did she watch it?
No. I'm just saying in general. But then, she was really fascinated by Dr. Manhattan walking around with his dick out the whole time. Yeah, it was amazing. No, but there was that element, but then there was also this sense of like this whole army of like devoted comic readers and people who knew Watchmen that were just sort of laughing at my naive guesses. Like, oh, that must be Dr. Manhattan. And they're all like, stupid asshole. Like, he doesn't know. So there were 2 levels of secrets. There was a kind that I was waiting to be revealed in a natural way. Like, I get to solve it as a participant. And then there were a bunch of things that I knew were already solved, and I was just guessing dumbly. So that was kind of weird and a little frustrating sometimes, but not too bad.
Okay, so next question is, I'm gonna ask Veidt.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you you want to frame these episodes, because we're doing 2 episodes that are going to air at different times and they're slightly different angles?
Yes, but then I have to pull up the show notes for the second page.
Well, Bonnie wrote them. Bonnie, maybe you can just do a real quick.
That's a good idea.
This one's about.
Bonnie, how are these different?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so this episode, we're going to be talking about the show itself, and how things basically our reactions to it, how we understood it and interpreted it. And in the second episode, part 2, we're going to be talking about things that writers can take away from it and use in their own fiction.
The stealing episode.
Yes.
Okay, so this question I'm going to ask Veidt because, and you can pass, Veidt, because I know there was something you took issue with, but it might be at the end, and you don't want to talk about it quite yet. But the question is, what didn't you love about it, if anything, and what threw you out of the story?
Okay, so let me see, up until the very last episode, I actually loved it from episode 1. I had no problem with having all these mystery boxes open, because I just felt like this is the kind of storyteller who's gonna solve it for me at the end. Yeah. We got to the last episode and I was like, what the bloody hell are they doing? Like, the whole thing with Manhattan, I mean, you're talking about basically a superhero, like a god. Literally, he is a god. And he can't get out of this glass box, but he can make 3 other people vanish from the room and go halfway across the world. He can do that. but he can't get out of a glass box on his own.
Do you think he couldn't or he wouldn't?
Okay, so now this is the other thing. So I was thinking, okay, so maybe he's feeling like he needs to give up, like he's just tired of all this. But there was nothing in his whole storyline, like in the original movie and in the whole series up to that point, that suggested that he wanted an out, like he was tired and fed up. And the other thing that really bothered me, what didn't bother me as much, was that there was no suggestion that Cal was more than what he was. In fact, he was like almost like a non-existent side character. Like you hardly ever saw him, except he just shows up with the kids once in a while, babysitting them. Like that's what he does, like nothing else.
Oh my God, I love the hands going up. Okay.
Right, it was fine, but then at the very end, it's like, oh, guess what, honey? I'm actually this God person. And it's like, what? Where did that come from? I mean, they explained it very well in like episode 8, and then you get to see like the bit of backstory with the other characters. But just like episode 9 just threw me. I still loved it, but it just was like, okay, like there's no reason why Manhattan wanted to commit suicide, like as far as what we've seen. So that was actually the biggest thing that just bugged me. Everything else, like anything else, other things that bugged me was like, oh yeah, okay, they solve it, it's fine. But that was like, okay, no, I can't deal with that. Sorry.
All right, so we're gonna go to Dave, and then we're gonna go to Davina, because they both had hands up. So Dave, you go first.
I think in the comics, I don't remember in the show as much, but in the comics, you know, they go to the point of saying how he can see what happens because he sees all time at once, but he can't change events. So he couldn't change what happened. So what happened, and he couldn't change it.
Okay, so Davina and then 90.
The thing that I took away from that, because initially I felt the way Veidt did, and I was like, come on, he can do anything. What's going on there? But when you look a little bit deeper, he went from being as powerful as a god and not caring to being God. He finally found love, and that's what God is supposed to be, complete love. And that's when he was willing to give up his life for anybody.
And 90.
I had issue with characterizations.
Okay, wait. Okay. Just before so we're moving on from that. So before we go there, yeah, I think that was an act of surrender. I think that, you know, like Dave said, he knew that this happened because he can see what happened. He didn't see the chain of events necessarily that would put him in that box because he only knows time as he experiences it. But once he knew that was the conclusion, as a human, I think he just surrendered. Like as humans, we have to contemplate death, right? So like I'm actually watching The Good Place right now, and the only reason I'm sticking with that show was because Bonnie was like, no, it's awesome. But the first few episodes I watched a couple of times and it did not resonate with me. And now I'm like at the end of season 2 and I think it's amazing. And it just is. If anybody yes, see The Good Place. Just stick with it. But I'm at the part now where one of the characters has never had to confront death before, and they have to teach him to have empathy. And because he's, you know, an all-knowing being who doesn't have lifespans, he's never considered that he might not be here. And the moment he has to consider that, he becomes human. And then he has fears just like anybody else. And so I think that John, Dr. Manhattan, became human. And I think that's what that's showing. It's not that he couldn't, he's all powerful, he could have escaped, sure. But that's not what we're supposed to take away from that.
See, I saw that as a little Nakatomi. I saw there was a little bit in that because ultimately what needed to happen happened, but he had to die in order for it to happen.
Yep.
So that's what I saw.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And by the way, Nakatomi is an example of the things that we steal. So that's shorthand. We all know that Nakatomi means that the bad guy, or in this case, it's not a bad guy, but basically the thing that you don't want to happen is the thing you wanted to happen all along, right? Like in Die Hard, when Hans Gruber actually wants them to cut off the power because he wants to get into the vault. So that's a Nakatomi Plaza. All right, and then 90, characterization.
I was just bothered by the fact that these, right at the end, the guy dies. His children don't give a shit. I mean, he was their father. He was this loving, wonderful guy, and they all go to bed and they pull the covers up. I'm thinking, your dad died. They didn't give a shit. That bothered me.
Well, they live in a world where it rains squids. It changes your perception. Bonnie. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Naini.
Well, I also was bothered by things I didn't think were motivated well enough. The sheriff leaving his house and leaving his guys behind. That's stupid. You know, why? You just had a police.
Yeah, that's fair. I've got no comeback for that. That is fair.
You run over this thing, those nails, and what do? Oh, what? You get out of the car? And
okay, but you know how they solve that problem? That you're thinking too much like a writer, because I'm going to tell you how they solved that problem, and they solved it like a badass director, which was with that score, which was just crazy. It was all doom, you know, like every
Oh my
time.
God, I love that. I was actually going to mention that score.
Yeah.
It was a little like John Carpenter Halloween, but it worked perfect in this context.
It's so great, and like in moments like that when he's leaving the house and it's the car, like they give you other things that are like, it's a little hoodwinky, but like it's not that stuff's not there, Naini, because you're totally right. It's that like this has to happen for the story to happen, and so it's okay, but we're gonna. We do it with language. We distract our readers in other ways, you know, to get away with that. It's like what I'm always telling Dave, man, you control the camera. This is actually a really good example of where Damon Lindelof or whoever put that together did that. He's like, okay, you know, I got to make sure like his exit is sweet. It's got that cool dun dun dun. People will be like, ooh, I like the score. That's all he's doing.
I think he went by himself because he was crooked and he was. I don't remember the reason. It made sense to me at the time, but he was crooked and he was keeping his crooked shit from other people. He was going to go find out on his own.
But you know, to Naini's point, he just ran over nails. You know, is he really just getting out? And I mean, immediately there's the flashlight beam, the strobing, so that does explain that. But he still had to make eye contact with that again.
Are you going to sit in your truck and wait for someone to shoot you where they
well, still, right, it's just very, like, to me, those are, that gets nitpicky because it's like, look, these are the larger things that had to happen. And those are hard building blocks to move as storytellers, right? It's like the little ones. They're little. Ben, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think he was under hypnosis by the time he was getting out of the truck, like going off alone. I'm not sure about, but yeah, but because I think he sees the blinking light like as the truck is even driving up. So I think everything from there on, you could at least explain that he's
yeah. And Joel just made a really good point too, that, you know, like they live in a world, and they did reinforce this several times. It's not like he could just draw his weapon. You know, their weapons are not like that. They, you know. Joel's actual comment was he can't just call the panda to get permission to fire. And that's funny because there's this character who has this giant like mascot-sized panda head. And like the show has little.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, they had, because when we were talking about the score, I was thinking another thing that I made a specific point to mention is, so on two levels. First of all, I love the guy who plays Looking Glass, but more particularly, I love that he was cast as Looking Glass. Like it's not like I think the actor is so amazing, although I did like him. It's that guy as Looking Glass, especially when he's got the thing over his face and he's in that pod and he's just reciting this rote, was just magical. And him, and I really, really liked the girl too. I forget what her name was, Bien, I think. I really liked her. The casting was great.
Her mom was insanely good. My favorite moment of the show probably is the first, I don't know, 4 minutes of episode 4.
Is that when she comes in and announces that she's taken their land?
Yes. Yeah. Like every moment of that was just awesome. and her delivery, she reminds me of her entire performance reminds me of the scene in Kill Bill where Lucy Liu is like talking down to the Yakuza. Like she's got the same vocal intonations and like everything that she says. And yeah, it's awesome. Okay, Johnny, I'm going to ask you. Oh, actually, no, Bonnie. Bonnie, you had your hand up a bit ago.
Oh, I was just going back to Dr. Manhattan giving up. I think maybe they might have been trying to imply, because they did make a little bit of a big deal about how he had so much power and he could have done more and he didn't. And then he actually tells Angela Like, you know, I was just trying to be what people wanted me to be. I was trying to be the hero. I was trying to be their savior. I think it's possible that they're trying to hint that, like, by becoming human and being Cal, he realized what a terrible God he had been, right? And so he realizes there's like kind of no future for him going back to being a God, and there's not really a future for him staying human, because if he gives up his power, then someone else becomes the God. So I just wanted to add that.
And depending on how you interpret the end too, if he is passing it on to Angela,
He did.
then he had to
Totally
to
called
inspire
that
for
final
the
shot. She's going to put her foot over the thing and then it's going to end. Yeah.
Jesus.
Joel.
Joel's raised hand was like using the force or something.
So speaking of that final shot, the thing that I liked about that is how it paralleled the last panel of the graphic novel, where you see the new frontiersman reporter standing there with his hand hovering over the book. I mean, I'm giving it up to you to decide what happens. The exact same thing. I just thought that was really awesome.
Yeah, I did not remember that. That is cool. Okay, so Johnny, I'm going to give this question to you because Johnny famously in the studio does not like superhero stuff, right? Like he likes Batman because it's realistic, and he realistic, and he likes Unbreakable because, you know, it's grounded in reality. So the question is, thinking about other works that bring superheroes into the real world and tries to make them feel realistic, what do you think Watchmen does or does well that no one else does?
Well, I don't have enough experience with a lot of those shows that Bonnie listed, so I can't really say relative to those shows. I will say that that is very accurate. It's because it's the same reason that we couldn't write billionaire romances without explaining their businesses. Like, just it is not a good explanation for me. Like, oh, the Earth's yellow sun makes Superman strong. Like, fuck you. Are you kidding me? So, like, I like the idea of something grounded. And what I think fascinated me most about this, I mean, I really liked it. I don't think I drooled all over it as much as some people did. I thought it was really amazing. The cool stuff for me was actually before Dr. Manhattan. I mean, I liked when that came in. It didn't ruin it in any way. I thought that was really good storyline. But just the confident nature of storytelling where, like, the cops wear masks. We're not going to explain that for a really long time. You know, the releasing of the guns, like I had forgotten about that they have to call in and release the guns, the subtle changes, the way that Vietnam was a state because the timeline had been changed. 9/11 didn't happen because Squidfest happened. I just realized that. But as far as the explanations for, I mean, you know, the idea that Dr. Manhattan is the only thing that's kind of crazy in this, and that in that Lady True is not really in any way, like, nobody's really supernatural. They're just doing stuff with science. No, I mean, that really worked for me.
And were you buying the superhero because there was just one superhero?
Yeah, I think you can get away with one supernatural being. I actually don't think that's universally true for me, because a lot of superhero movies just feature one superhero. I think it's because we got grounded in the real world first. And I think that's why. I think it's because we got the real world before there's suddenly it's because, you know what it is? It's superhero second. That's why. It wasn't superhero first.
Yeah, that's true. Because, like, I remember, I think my favorite episode is probably the one where she takes, so Angela, her grandfather wants her to know all kinds of things, and they have something called a nostalgia pill, which totally sounds like something Johnny and I would have written in something. And
I think we wrote that sequence right down to the fucking elephant that was never explained.
Yes, totally. So I loved that element, by the way. I think
they must have given the elephant nostalgia pills, right? So that she thought that it was his feed.
No, I think the elephant was like a giant organic hard drive, because elephants have huge memories, and so they needed a place to, like, store all of these memories. That's what I got.
Okay, but that's bullshit, because an elephant's memory is not bigger than a human's memory. That's just a thing people say.
Of course it's bullshit, but what a rad visual. And it was also the most lost moment, in the entire show, right? Like that was a very like Damon Lindelof-y thing to do. Anyway, yeah. So some of the shows that Bonnie actually listed are The Boys, the Kick-Ass movies, Zack Snyder's movies with DC, Logan, Brightburn. So you know, all of those have actual superheroes that, well, actually, I don't think Kick-Ass does, right? Is Kick-Ass? I've never seen Kick-Ass.
No, Kick-Ass is just a vigilante, if I remember right.
Yeah, okay. Well, all of those have actual like super powers. But this, I think, when I was watching my favorite episode was the nostalgia, because she has to relive all these memories, and there were so many different like cinematic tricks and just really cool reveals, and it was just a beautiful episode. But then 2 after that is the one, it's called A God Walks Into a Bar, but even on the title they put A and bar together, which is the main character's last name, and it's just delightful. And so that whole thing, I was thinking about you, Johnny, during that episode, and thinking, okay, if Johnny can buy into Dr. Manhattan, he's going to love this episode. But if he doesn't buy into Dr. Manhattan, he's going to think this is stupid. So how did you feel about that episode?
No, I liked it. I think the reason, because I've been thinking about why I did buy into Dr. Manhattan, and it's, you know, we write a lot of speculative stuff, right? It's mainly sci-fi. It's things where something fantastical or supernatural happens. And I think the reason that Manhattan worked for me in this is because, I mean, I don't think Dr. Manhattan is actually a material difference maker to an episode until halfway through the series or more, right? Like we hear about him, but there's really nothing going on. And so to me, that isn't that different from we have a group of ordinary people and then aliens invade. Or, you know, any of the other things that happen in our stories where we have established real people first, and then by the time we get to the superhero, it's just a weird thing that happens to those real people. So yeah, I thought that was really good, and you're right, because I could imagine writing that episode. It was very like Sean and I have this style, and I know in my first drafts I have a style where I tend to explain a problem by having somebody with doubts ask questions. And so you have Angela asking like, well, of course that wouldn't work. And then he explains why it would work, you know, that sort of thing. And so it very much fit my style, I think. And I did like that episode.
Dave just dropped an explanation for the elephant in chat. They're a symbol of the historical Lady True, who was said to ride an elephant into battle. She was also said to have a 3-foot-long breasts that she tied behind her back before going into battle. So who knows? Watchmen's Lady True has adapted an elephant for her company logo, suggesting both her namesake and the memory-related work she did during the nostalgia years. She also uses them as spinal fluid donors in the treatment process for nostalgia overdose.
So if we're talking about memory and lore and all that stuff and the symbolism behind things and the series, who can explain to me the significance of the watches beyond what we saw? Like the idea that time and watches and Watchmen and why that was so important.
Joel?
Well, one, it's again Ozymandias doing the poem, The Watchmaker's Son. Dr. Manhattan, the first god created by man, was a watchmaker. So I think the significance starts there. And then everything has to do with Dr. Manhattan's misinterpretation of time, what happens and what does happen and what he is capable of doing given his understanding of time. That's what I think the significance of the watch is.
Yes, and there's also the, I don't remember if it was from the comics, the movie, Who Watches the Watchman, like that phrase, like these people are supposed to be, you know, protecting and watching people, but who the hell is watching them, and what will they be left to do to their own devices? How violent will they get? How out of control?
Well, I liked that I saw all the sides. So the FBI agent who, and I know that that's something that's in the backstory that I don't know. Like clearly there's some really cool shit going on there, but I liked how I totally saw her perspective as wanting to fuck them up. They're like, you're wearing masks and being vigilantes. Like I can see her skepticism. And at the same time, I saw everybody else's perspective. And I always like that tension. And I was so annoyed when she wouldn't call Looking Glass, but at the same time, when at the end, she's like mirror guy. And it's like this moment where she's glad he's there. No, that all I thought worked really well.
Ben.
Yeah, I was thinking watch symbolism might also have something to do with the blind watchmaker idea of like the deist god who created the world, set it in motion, and then just like leaves it like that. Especially if you think about Dr. Manhattan as the god who can see it all unwinding but can't change anything about it, that could tie into.
What's the place of Dr. Manhattan in the story as a whole? So here's what I mean by that. The title is Watchmen, and I get that there's a double meaning thing going on there, but you would be inclined to think, I would guess, that the Watchmen refers to a group of people because it's men and not man, and you would think that it's these people who are the peacekeepers, the police. So I would assume the Watchmen are the vigilantes. So is Manhattan kind of like somebody around whom events occur and the central people are, the central story is the vigilantes, the cops, or not? Like, what is the larger story there?
Well, I think Joel might be able to answer that best, but the first book is more like a murder mystery, than it's a very different experience, the two. Like it's clearly the same world, but the experience is different, and there's a lot of things that echo. So we were watching like a movie within a show, or a show within a show with like the Minutemen, and it was like, this real stylized version. So there's like a book within a book in The Watchmen, and so there's that kind of thing where there's layers, and it's like what Joel was saying about the final shot. There's that kind of like echo, like there's a feeling and a structure. But as far as the story, it plays very differently. Yeah, Dave.
In the comics, Dr. Manhattan was the one person with powers, the one person that could do anything. And after he got sick of it all, and like how he was used to end the Vietnam War, and just he was being used, and he just got sick of humanity and just fucked off and left. So basically the one person that could do anything just said, fuck y'all, and left. So I think that's some sort of statement that the one person with power to actually affect change gave up on people, because they were all pretty much parasites, I guess. I don't know.
Okay. I guess maybe I can re-articulate my question. Is normally, so think of like a classic Superman movie or a superhero movie. So Superman, Spider-Man, whatever. Like the whole thing is about, I don't know, on a surface level, like the amazing things that happen with powers, or in a moralistic level, like with great power comes great responsibility. But it's about kind of the journey of the superhero. In this series that we just saw, like I said, the superhero was almost a medium for the rest of the action to occur. He wasn't like central, really. And so I'm wondering what his function thematically is in this universe. Is it like there's a god, and so this is how the world responds to him? And I see Bonnie raising her hand, so I'd like to hear that answer.
He's actually the MacGuffin in the story, really. He's not a protagonist. He's not even a major character in terms of making things happen. He's the embodiment of what everybody thinks power is, right? It's like everybody in the story is aspiring to power in some way. Adrian like wanted to be worshipped, and that's why he told Dr. Manhattan, yeah, send me to Europa. That sounds like paradise, all these creatures who will serve me. And the 7th Cavalry and Keen and Judd, they were basically like, hey, the balance of power, we've lost control of it. White people should be in charge. And we need to like get this power from Dr. Manhattan so we can control the world and make sure things happen our way. So I actually saw him almost, in terms of story function, he was really just the MacGuffin that everybody wanted, right? And Angela wanted him for personal reasons, and Laurie Blake missed him. She wanted him for personal reasons.
I like that the god in the story is the MacGuffin.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because from my perspective, being totally new to this universe, I was perfectly satisfied with the police and the 7th Cavalry and all that stuff. And so when Manhattan appeared, I was like, well, I wasn't like annoyed by it or anything, but I was like, why do we need this?
Dave.
Well, the squids represent like an existential dread that people are living under PTSD over what happened, and they're always afraid that just shit can go wrong. And Dr. Manhattan is basically the savior. All these people are sending their hopes and prayers to him, and he's
oh my god, I loved the prayer booths. Was just a great touch.
But everybody thinks they're doomed, and God's ignoring them.
But isn't that the way we live right now?
Yeah.
Like yeah. Without a God, without a blue God with his dick out.
Joel.
So not only was Dr. Manhattan the MacGuffin of the story, he's also the MacGuffin of that society. He's the thing that the people we're supposed to hold accountable, the elected officials, the people who have promised to protect us. They are the ones that are also using Dr. Manhattan against everybody else. Look at this huge thing so that we can do all the nonsense that we're getting away with.
All right. So who here saw this twice? All right. So that's not a big group.
I would watch it again. I just haven't had time. So.
Well, yeah. No,
I loved it.
Yeah. No, I would have watched it again for sure, but not as immediately as I did. But I wanted to watch it again before this, just because, like, makes the conversation better, possibly. And it is surprising how much stuff you see the second time through. I mean, the dialogue is so precise. So there are things that are just can be taken, but like, oh, I see what you did there. A lot of the imagery is a lot more obvious. I mean, even the first time through, I noticed the egg thing, from the first episode, because it makes the Watchmen logo, and that was cool. It was very look at me, which I appreciate now why it was look at me. But seeing it the second time through, eggs are in every fucking episode. Like every episode, they're part of every single episode. And it's kind of funny how there's some things you just don't notice because you're not looking for them. And then once you know the whole story and how it all fits together, it becomes an even more beautiful mosaic. So if you did watch more than once, what are things that you took away the second time? For me, it was just how beautifully written this really was, how layered it was, and how much, because, okay, so the first time I watched it was as a storyteller. I watch a lot of shit. I'm always thinking about it. I'm always talking about it with you guys. So I was okay with all of the tricks that were being pulled, and I was enjoying it as a storyteller. The second time, so that meant that I could enjoy it and just have patience and know that it would come and it was rewarded. The second time I was watching it with Cindy and Haley, and I knew Haley would dig it, but it's important to me that I'm not subjecting Cindy to 9 hours of something she's going to be miserable watching. Like, it just is. So I'm like always like observing to see both how she's responding to it, but also just how I feel about what I'm watching. Is this confusing? Is this, indulgent? What kind of storytelling is this? And the second time through, I was again just really stricken by how there's nothing that isn't answered. It's really careful craftsmanship, and I just loved it.
There is an official Watchmen podcast where they do 3 episodes each, and Damon is talking in them. And he gives a lot of the credit for how well the stories like lined up, and a lot of the detailed stuff to his other writers there.
His writers,
it was very much a collaborative process.
Yeah, it would almost have to be. Like, there's just so much going on, and it's so lovingly detailed. And I mean, we've seen internally how that kind of collaboration can work, and it happens really fast because the ideas just start building on one another. And there were several ideas that were like, oh, I could imagine what that was like in the room, when they came up with that. And, we can get into some of those specifics as we go on. The next question, I'm just going to go straight to the source on this one. Bonnie, we're talking themes. What is The Watchmen about?
I think on a big scale, it's about looking at society's power. It's basically a world where vigilantes have been made illegal, right? But also the cops have been manipulated into operating just like vigilantes. They wear masks. They don't have like an official police station. They're hiding out in an abandoned warehouse, right? And they're beating information out of suspects, and they don't give a shit about anybody's rights. They're just dragging them in instead of like arresting them. And so it's kind of like about what happens when you take that idolization of like taking the law into your own hands, and you make that okay. like how corrupt do things become. But also I think when you look at like how the character arcs worked for Angela and Will, I think it also was trying to say something about how we are all part of these larger events, and there are these cycles of history that we don't have any choice in whether or not we're going to get caught up in them, but we do have a choice about how we're going to deal with the trauma that we experience as a result of living through them.
Yeah, there was so much going on. I mean, I'm really fascinated by the idea of inherited trauma, and like okay. So for framing, this starts with the 1921 Tulsa massacre, which is something that actually fucking happened, and isn't really in the history books. It's just kind of like, yeah, that never really happened, and it's this. I mean, it's horrible. There was an area in Tulsa, and the KKK came in and wiped everybody out. And so it's
not everybody.
Okay, not the grandson. I mean, I know
No. I mean, they didn't
died.
kill everybody. They killed a bunch of people.
They killed a lot of people.
Yeah,
Okay.
I forget the actual number.
Not everybody. Dave's right. It wasn't that big a deal. Oh my
God.
No,
I'm just saying they didn't destroy an entire town, is what I'm saying.
All right.
I mean, they didn't kill everybody in the town.
Okay, can you imagine what it was like to live in the town and have people come in and kill anybody in more than one at a time?
I get Dave's clarification.
So the point is that there was, this is inherited trauma. So the people who are even grandchildren of the people at that time, that's a genetic thing. And this is fascinating. And you can go, like in Israel, they can do brain scans, and they can tell just by looking at the brain scans whose parents were in concentration camps and whose weren't. Which, like, that's fascinating to me, that on just a brain scan level, we can tell. It's very difficult to argue against things like genetic trauma. And so the way that this story explores big questions like racism and inherited trauma were just fascinating, and a lot of throwaway world building elements that kind of made these bigger questions feel grounded. So a specific example I'll use is when Angela breaks into the Cultural Heritage Center, and she's like looking in her family tree, and she gets her little acorn, and then she has to go to the family tree room, and she drops the acorn, and then this digital tree grows out, and she can like pull your grandfather. Like, that whole part was just badass, because even though they don't have smartphones in this world, technology has just gone different branch. So it's still 2019. I believe they could have something like that, because that's what's important in their world. Yeah, Joel.
I think one of the most relatable illustrations of this idea of trauma that's not only shared across generations, but is also continuing to be covered up or altered for the public is the American Hero show, in that it was depicted Hooded Justice crashed through the window to save the people inside the store. But the reality was he actually was jumping out to get away from the racist store owner who was trying to shoot him with a shotgun.
Wow, that's really awesome. I didn't even pick up on that, but yes,
and
that's awesome.
in the comics, Hooded Justice was considered like a white German guy. In the TV show, they made him a black man, and I thought that was pretty damn cool. It pissed off a lot of extreme right-wing dudes that call the show Woke Man. And
well, that would be the entire show. I was thinking that too, because I wanted to say that it was bold.
That's actually funny.
But it shouldn't be considered bold to like make a show that knocks the KKK, right? Like that's just the wrong adjective to use. But I hadn't seen anything like that before, and I thought that the whole concept was really very cool.
Yeah, I thought that reinventing the character like that was really awesome, because it didn't do anything. It didn't change canon, right? It just it evolved it.
Well, they never said who he really was in the comics.
Yeah, right. He's just a character. So basically, it was okay that the comic portrayed him in that way, because that's what the world believed. And so this was showing us more of the world, and so that changed the context. That's just kind of amazing. Okay, so let me call on Eileen, because Eileen was really, really super into this the whole way along. What were your favorite moments in the series, and why?
Well, I really loved when Jean Smart's character turned up. I thought she was kind of hilarious. She was kind of like, I don't know, boys playing with their masks, even though she was, even though she was sort of, there wasn't just her, limited to the male characters.
Did you love her whole thing with Dr. Manhattan? I want to tell you a joke and how the whole episode was like broken out with that.
I did. I liked that, that she had to go into, the prayer chamber to show her vulnerability, because that's the only time you saw her vulnerable, when she knew she couldn't be seen. So I thought that was a powerful demonstration to show character. But it wasn't until I started to see her loss that I felt like, oh, okay, all these characters are really connected through loss. And when Dr. Manhattan experiences loss in a human way is when he reaches his most godlike status, which is how I saw it at the end. But I never found out, the little disc at the end that comes out of his head? What happened to that? What does she do with that?
Wait for season 2.
I don't know.
Is that
Supposedly there won't be a season 2.
Oh, there will be.
Dave thinks there will be because there's money.
Yeah, when I saw the ending, Sean's like, it's this perfect thing, perfectly wrapped up. I'm like, no, it's not. There's a shit ton more story there. How can you say it's wrapped up?
Yeah, they could do more story, but I'm fine with what I've been shown.
Yeah, I'm with Dave. I'd be shocked if there weren't a season 2.
Well, Damon Lindelof insists that he's not going to do it. And I mean, regardless if there is or is not, I think that I love that his approach to this is all I have. I'm not built. He didn't set it up for a season 2. And that's most stuff is set up for a season 2. And I felt like this, if there is no season 2, it's still a story. Like it's a beautifully told story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And like Marie says, it doesn't need it. If there is one, I'll watch the hell out of it.
Plot twist: Alan Moore is gonna make it.
Yeah. I'm like Johnny. I'm not a massive superhero fan, and funnily enough, I liked Unbreakable too. So to me, I guess that her character was satisfying to me because of her irreverence for that.
Well, I liked how her character because I was thinking about this too, and I tried to articulate it earlier, and I don't think I did it very well, is I was willing to believe the world that they painted for me, like with the masks and everything, like it perfectly made sense. But then when she comes in, you're like, she's addressing any objections that are still left. Well, I'm sorry. Your entire police force wears masks? That doesn't make, like, she's saying all the things that a skeptic would say. And I thought that was really cool that they made that balance.
And I also thought that overall, one of the reasons that I felt so attached to it so fast is that it really felt like it was making a commentary on the state of things now, the political state, the polarization, the heightened racism. And I was reading, I cannot remember who wrote this article that compared I cannot remember the name of Jeremy Irons' character.
Adrian Veidt?
Yeah, it compared his father to Fred Trump. So I thought, as soon as I started to see those kind of parallels, I kind of got attached to it, and I don't want to be too political about it, but.
No, I think it was very political, and I think that's one of the things that I loved about it is it wasn't afraid. It was.
Yeah, I agree. It was very political, but not in a heavy hand. Calling it woke man is dismissive. Like it wasn't that at all.
They're acting.
It is funny.
Yeah.
Well, they're acting like the original wasn't written by Alan Moore, who's very much a lefty. So this isn't. They stole my Watchmen. It was never yours.
Did anybody? I'm just going to start opening this up to anybody. Did anybody have any twists that they especially liked? All right, well, I'll go with one of the twists that I especially liked. It wasn't really a plot twist because nothing depended on it. Well, maybe. But it was just one of those moments that I know that I will steal absolutely. From now on, I will be using the gold statue. So the gold statue was one of my favorite moments in the whole series. Now, what happens is there's this moment where Angela is going to Lady True's, castle in the sky, and in front of the entrance there is a gold statue of Adrian Veidt, and she's like, "Yeah, that looks old."
That's actually the FBI agent who does that.
Oh,
she's all caustic about it. Yeah, she's like, "Why does he look so old?" Well, he is old. Well, he looks like shit.
Yeah, and that's right. And she gives
because
this whole
she knew him
explanation
when he was younger.
But there's this whole explanation about how in her culture they actually revere the elderly, and on and on and on. And then at the very end you see that when Adrian is being pulled down in the spaceship, he's painted in like gold paint and being preserved, and it's really just him the entire time. And I love that when something is right in front of your eyes the whole entire time and then you're changed context. I just love that. Joel, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, there was actually something about that exchange that bothered me, and it was, she says, why did you have to make him look so old? And she goes, oh, because he is old. And because she did the present tense, I was like, oh, he's fucking in there. Immediately thought that, and I was like, all right.
Oh, see, I totally caught it the second time. The first time, nope, it went right over my head, and it was a really delicious reveal for me. I liked it a lot, and it wasn't. It was one of those things we didn't need it. Like nothing.
Well, I mean, if you think about how it was done too, because we have Han Solo frozen in carbonite. Right? He's like freaked out, but they tell him, okay, please put your hands on your hips and look off majestically into the distance before you're frozen.
One thing I was disappointed a little in the last episode, and I'm not even sure I can put a point on why. It just felt like it built up to such
because
a
all
thing.
the other episodes were so amazing before it. Really,
it was a little anticlimactic. It was over too soon. I don't know what I expected to happen, but I don't know. It just didn't deliver the same way to me.
That's interesting, Dave, because I remember I knew how much was left in the episode. And I remember looking many times and being like, there's only 15 minutes left. Like, how is that possible?
So, okay. I think that there's definitely a consensus here that we didn't love the last episode as much as the rest of the show. Did anybody feel like the last episode totally delivered or over delivered and was as good as the rest of the show? No. Okay. Well, yeah. So as storytellers, what do we take from that? Is it what wasn't? Does anybody want to say what it was that really prevented them, who hasn't already said, I didn't connect with, Dr. Manhattan's story? Does anybody have a different take on why the last episode just didn't quite work as well for them? Marie.
Well, I definitely had a problem with the fact that Angela is like during the frozen squid rain, Angela's like in a spot where she's safe, and then she randomly decides to just go somewhere else, and her grandfather happens to be there, and they happen to have it was all very weird. Like, why do that? Why did she leave the prayer area? I don't know if that's like it's probably a nitpick, but there you go.
Bonnie. No, and 90 doesn't think it's a nitpick either. I saw her admonishing face. Bonnie.
It actually isn't a nitpick, because in the previous episode, or excuse me, earlier in the episode, Dr. Manhattan tells her, he teleports the kids away, and she says, where are they? And he says, they're with your grandfather in the Dreamland Theater. So he actually tells her where the kids are. And so as soon as the squid fall, because she's a mom first, like that's really what she wants to be throughout this whole thing. And so she's risking her life to make sure she can get to where her kids are and make sure they're okay. And I actually thought that was part of her character arc, that she actually was willing to risk the squid fall to go make sure that her kids were okay.
Bonnie, did the final episode work for you?
It worked. I think it could have been a little stronger if we'd had more insight into Dr. Manhattan's character arc, because I do think his surrender would have felt a little more powerful. I read a lot between the lines in terms of trying to understand why he decided that this was the way things had to be. And I honestly think he was just like realizing, I can't stay human and also keep my power from being misused by other people who want it. but I mean, you really had to think about it to get that. It wasn't something that just came out naturally in the narrative. And that's why I think the ending was a little bit unsatisfying.
Bigger showdown.
Yeah, that is fair. Because there was that like clash between he can point at someone and they dissolve into particles and now I can't do anything, right? So we're supposed to buy that. And I mean, to be fair, I did, but it's also, I really wanted to, right? I was invested in loving the story.
It would have been nice if they somehow explained that, you know, he'd lost some of his power. Like when he gave some to the pool, like that could have been like an explanation. It would have.
Yeah, they could have given him some form of kryptonite, you know, just to show that, okay, he's temporarily weakened here, you know. Right. Bonnie says they tried with the lithium cage, but that wasn't right. I mean, and I noticed it more the second time too, with a few things with watch batteries that I didn't pick up on the first time because they just didn't really hang a lantern on it like maybe they should have. Okay, so let's talk world building, because world building is like oh wait, Joel.
Thank you. The last episode for me it was more of a feeling thing than anything else. It had the feeling of finish your peas so you can get to the dessert. It just seemed like a lot of that stuff was brushed over just so they can get to the is she a god or isn't she? That's really what bothered me about the last one.
Yeah, and that's fair. It's almost like, and you know, this happens in a lot of seasonal TV. The second to the last episode is just the best. Like that penultimate episode, there's so much that they deliver, and then the last episode's actually about closure and setup for the next season.
Did anybody else here learn the word penultimate from AICN?
I did. You know, but that's when you like, that is in a lot of shows, their season's best episode, or at least most exciting episode, is that second to last episode. Yeah.
I do want to say that the fact that they arrested him was kind of goofy. Right? You know, they had to make the arrest at the end.
Bonnie.
I actually think that was perfect, because that was like the end of Wade's character arc. Wade was basically someone who had been traumatized by the giant squid, and he spent his whole life living in fear of that happening again. And then he had that whole arc of disillusionment where he realized everyone had lied to him and that the squid was not some cosmic terror that was going to happen again. It was just like one man being an asshole. And he was like, okay, I can actually do something about that instead of hide in my bunker and wrap my head up with magic tinfoil. So I actually loved the arrest. That was one of my favorite moments in the whole thing.
Yeah, Wade was awesome, and it was especially awesome because I was watching, concurrent with this, I watched Buster Scruggs, where he's this like singing, dancing cowboy, like nothing at all like Mirror guy at all.
I like that he was like somebody you'd meet in Florida, but without the racism.
Okay, so what are elements of world building that are just like our absolute favorite? Johnny just switched positions. I'm like, wait, he disappeared. Johnny, because I know world building you really love, and that seems like something you would have paid a lot of attention to watching this. So is there a favorite piece that you had, or like just something?
No, I liked it all. I made a comment in the chat that nobody saw that. Well, I didn't say this, but the first episode is my favorite. And I could have watched an entire show with just the cops and the Rorschach people. I didn't need any of the supernatural, any of the gods. I didn't need Adrian Veidt on the moon. Or where was he? Was he on Mars with Manhattan? I don't even know where he was.
It was a moon of Jupiter.
Oh, he was on Europa. That's right.
Yeah.
So I didn't need any of that.
Should have been on Uranus.
So just
have you been waiting all episode for that?
Just the casual assumed the trusting aspects of the world building, the this is how it is, and we're not going to explain it to you because you're smart enough to figure it out by yourselves. Things like, okay, so just maybe to clarify a little bit more the logic of it, I was mentioning before I liked that when Jean Smart's character, when she came in and you guys are just wearing masks, because what that did for me was it took, like I was already willing to roll with the cops wear masks. And then But then you realize, oh, it makes way more sense as a pilot program than just the cops wear masks. Like, it's just like Tulsa really is fucked up. They had this whole white knight thing, so they're going to try a pilot there. So those sorts of things, just logically grounded in the real world, really worked for me.
Because they're smaller leaps, right?
Well, and they justify things that otherwise wouldn't make any sense. So the panda guy is about as far as you can go in terms of, like, ridiculous. But like,
Loop Man was right.
It almost feels a little like if you know that scene in Office Space where, like, well, you can wear flair to express yourself. Like, that's those guys wearing flair. Like, I want to be a pirate. I want to be Red Scare. So, that actually is, I thought, super cool, but it's just that trusting nature of world building rather than like, let me explain to you what happened.
Ben, did you want to talk color?
Yeah. I mean, this is maybe a little more symbolism than world building, but they really intertwine. I loved the egg. I mean, obviously we talked about the egg going all the way through, but somewhere early on, maybe episode 2 or 3, they talk about, basically when you break an egg, and it kind of like blurs the boundaries, and basically, I think like Bonnie was talking about power being what the whole thing is about, and I think it's power and boundaries. And you see this, like, anywhere yellow shows up, it's something that's restraining power, and so and like forming a boundary that may be protective or may be it has this ambivalence, like are the masks protecting the police or making them completely powerful and like not answerable to anybody? And there's so many things that go both ways like that. But so you see yellow on the masks hiding the police and protecting them. You see, like, the yellow containers for the guns kind of adding accountability, but also preventing them from using their power. And then, but then the egg goes through that whole thing too, because you have the chicken and egg thing. Like, sorry, it's hard to articulate. There's a ton going on, but you basically say like,
and there's 12 people looking at you.
Yeah, right. Like, are these things in place because they've gone wrong, or have things gone wrong because all these boundaries and restrictions are in place? And and then you have, like, the police versus humans versus civilians boundary. You have all, like, the racial boundaries, and every time those boundaries are broken, everything gets scrambled, scrambled eggs, whatever. But then, like, I just realized while we were talking here, at the very end, you have even the Dr. Manhattan putting his power into the egg. Like, when that egg gets broken and consumed, it's like passing on his power too, and it's again like the boundary of the power is being broken. It's amazing, and that's what I'm most excited to watch the second time through for, is seeing all the places yellow shows up and all the places eggs show up, and what it's really doing.
Yeah, my favorite thing about the world building overall, it's really similar to what Johnny was saying. It's just that it's all justified. Like, so you've got these prayer booths where you go and you leave a prayer to Dr. Manhattan. I so believe that, people's need to be heard, and like it's a crazy idea, but is it believable? Yes. As soon as, like, that's the thing. There's this daisy chain of logic in the show. If you believe this, then this other thing is justified. So it's hard to believe that there's a human-made God living on Mars, okay? But once we establish that that's the truth, prayer booths make perfect sense, right? That's super easy to believe. And then you find out, oh, okay, so then that one, like, I already loved it. I loved, Lori having her, want to hear a joke. That whole thing was awesome. But then later, we're in Lady True's kingdom, and she's got the big globe, and she can press any city where there's a prayer booth and watch the prayers. Of course, Lady True would have that. So now I believe that too. It's just all these different things that I didn't know until I see them, and then they make perfect sense. That's it. It's world building that, as fantastical as it is, it makes sense when you see it. You don't have to spend a lot of time believing it. I think that's interesting that the first episode is Johnny's favorite, but actually that makes sense. It's because it spent so much time making you believe it, right? And that's what's important to Johnny. In a superhero thing, if he doesn't believe it, he's out, right? What they didn't spend a lot of time with is making it enjoyable. Like, the first episode is not like for just a casual person to just watch and be like, oh, this is awesome. Now I'm going to go right into the next one. There is a sophistication to it, and there is a certain level of I've got you required. But Johnny was naturally more in tune to that anyway, because he wants veracity in his
I thought the
storytelling.
first one was totally compelling. The first one was what made me want to watch the second one. So I think it just depends who you are.
Yeah, totally. Okay, was there any, I want to ask, is there any world building element that didn't work for any of us? But before we go there, was there anything that anybody wants to say before we move on of a world building element that they especially liked? Ben, did you raise your hand again? Were you scratching?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He's got that beard now, so.
Yeah, well, I can tell.
Yeah, I thought what they did with Adrian Veidt's estate was really fascinating. In fact, the part that most turned me off early on were the scenes with him. They were just so weird. And
well, they're zany. They're very.
Oh, I knew that was going to pay off.
Yeah, I figured you would have dug that because you like these zany ideas that are just be patient. I'm getting there.
Well, that's the cool thing. I went into this show level of trust because so many people had said it completely pays off, just go with it. So I was totally in for the ride. But those are really macabre and weird and just yeah, they're very off-putting in the way they're filmed and what's going on in them and stuff. But the thing is, it's so interesting to have. It does pay off. You see why it's set up that way, how you have this weird little country estate on a moon of Jupiter, and why you have these same servants over and over and keep dying, and all of the stuff ends up.
By the way, that whole thing was my dream come true, bud.
It's pretty incredible. But as far as iconic moments, I think when he first breaks the atmosphere, or the force field or whatever it is, and you see the outside and the frozen corpses and Jupiter up in the sky, and all of that is
oh, is that what that is? I took that to be a portal or something. I didn't realize that was the force field around here. That makes way more sense. I was like, where the hell are they going?
No, it's there's literally just a boundary to his little bubble of weird English.
I thought there was a mysterious gate in Time Bandits up there.
Yeah, and he makes a special suit and gets out of the bubble, and it's so crazy. It all comes together so fast, and yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's confident storytelling.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Okay, so
What do you bet Dave's got a freezer full of Easy Bake clones?
I'm pretty sure he does. He has a little waiting pool out there. You look good. Were there any world building elements that just flat out did not work? Yeah, just Dr. Manhattan. That's the only problem we have. Okay, well, awesome. Here's what we're going to do. We actually still have characters to talk about, but I want to fold those into the next episode because this one's already ran really long. And so that makes a lot more sense. So for us live, we're only going to get water. For the rest of you, see you next week.